Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Low on the Go for this week. I'm your host, Russ Lowe. This episode is devoted to an NCAA football preview. In this edition, we're going to share some predictions with you about the season. We're going to have a dark horse pick for the year, the conference that will be left out of the playoff, and my four-team prediction selection will be revealed. So let's jump right into what we're going to talk about here. Let's begin by looking at conference ranks. The eternal question seems to always be, is the SEC the best football conference in college football? Well, last year was a test, quite honestly, and it looks going into this year like the SEC has their back against the wall. Out of 7 teams from the West Division that went to bowl games last year, only 2 of them won, and that's Texas A&M and Arkansas. So the SEC truly tested. Some of the East teams began to step up the ladder, so to speak, and sort of try to make that claim for the Eastern Division to get back into power. We'll see if they can do that. In my opinion, from top to bottom, I still think the SEC is overall the best conference in the country. You still have a wealth of power in the West Division. They're loaded. I mean, you've got Alabama, Auburn, LSU. You know, those teams seem to be perennial powers, and then it seems like Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Arkansas, and now Texas A&M are sort of stepping it up too, and each year a couple of them seem to be pretty strong. So the SEC is loaded in the West. I think the SEC East is also doing pretty good for itself in the fact that it is slowly getting back to respectability. Georgia has always been a perennial power. Mark Richt is able to get a good 9 or 10 win season just about every year. He's been pretty consistent. He can't win the bigger games past that, but he gets to that point, and he has proven that consistently. Missouri, since they've joined the conference, they've won the East the last 2 consecutive years. So something has to be said for Missouri jumping right into the fire and coming out with guns fully loaded here. They've done really well. And now Tennessee is on that march back. And you've got to think with the youthfulness and the athletic ability and the coaching that Tennessee has that they're going to be back in the mix this year as well. You've also got to figure Florida right now is in a state of limbo. The Gators could go either way. They could have a fairly successful season or they could struggle. But the SEC looking tough. Florida is usually a contender most years. They have a brand new head coach. Jim McElwain comes from Colorado State to take over the program. That's why Florida has a question mark by them right now. Fans are a little bit antsy about what the expectations are for the year. So anything could happen. In South Carolina, they're sort of in the same boat that Florida is. They're trying to find their identity. They've got a proven head coach. Of course, the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier, is there with his attitude and his personality from the sideline, lending toward the success of that team. He's had 3 consecutive 11-win seasons recently until this past season where he finished 7-6. You have to wonder if South Carolina's struggles are going to be just a random thing, or if it's going to be more consistent for them right now. But you've got to consider the West, as loaded as it is, and the East, the fact that it's stepping it up. The SEC is still the most powerful conference in the country. There's no question about it. In my opinion, the Pac-12 is probably the number 2 conference in the country because they're really stepping it up now. In the past, you've seen perennial powers like Oregon and USC. Well, now you're seeing even more teams get involved. UCLA, Arizona State, Arizona, and Stanford have become mainstays, and that means that half of that conference, and let's throw Utah in there as well. Let's not forget the Utes. They have been an incredible addition to the Pac-12, former Mountain West member, and they've really stepped it up and played well also. The Pac-12 is starting to really get a strong unit going. That's something we SEC fans don't tend to want to hear or admit, but the Pac-12 has a good football conference, folks, and they're here to stay, and they are the number 2 conference in my rankings. Number 3, fast approaching, is the ACC. I'm so impressed with what the ACC is doing. Of course, Florida State has been a recent national champion, but you see a team coming on like Georgia Tech. Clemson has been impressive the last 2 or 3 years. North Carolina State is looking good this year. North Carolina is making some strides as well under Larry Fedora. So the ACC is making their own march to respectability right now, and I have them pegged as the number 3 conference in the land. And I'll go as far as number 4 to say the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten has some good members, but as you typically see, the Big Ten, in my opinion, is a fairly weak conference because they're top-heavy. You see Michigan State and Ohio State at the very top, and Wisconsin and maybe Michigan are right there, trying to just claw and fight their way towards a decent season. But other than that, you don't have a whole lot of power in that conference. Minnesota has been a bottom feeder. Indiana, Purdue, Northwestern, all these teams have been very lackluster over the years, so it's hard to rank the Big Ten in the upper echelon of conferences in the country. That's why I have them at number 4. So that's the rank of conferences right now, in my opinion, going into this college football season. Well, the big question right now, folks, is with 4 spots in the 4-team playoff, who is going to get left out? You have 5 major conferences. So who's going to get left out this year? Well, I believe the ACC is actually going to be left out of this year's playoff contention, and I'll tell you why. I think the ACC will resemble the SEC in a certain way, in the fact that they're going to start beating each other senseless. You have all kinds of, big matchups head-to-head throughout the season, and I think the ACC champion could very well have 2 losses this year. And I think a 2-loss ACC champion is probably going to be knocked out because you're going to have an undefeated SEC champion or an undefeated Big Ten or even Pac-12 champion or a 1-loss champion from one of those leagues, and they will get in before a 2-loss ACC team will. So I think the ACC is going to see that happen this year. I think there's going to be a lot of bloodshed on that field. I think there's going to be a lot going on, and these teams are going to start knocking each other out. And it's going to be impressive to see how they answer the bell. It's time for college football, folks, and the ACC is going to get left out of this year's playoff, I'm afraid. But here's a little bit of comfort for them, because the dark horse candidate of this year comes from the ACC, in my opinion. I tell you what, we all need to watch out for Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is my dark horse team for the year. I think the Yellow Jackets are going to be playing very passionately this year. Paul Johnson has been an emerging candidate as head coach. He's really got that offense going there. That option offense has really started rolling and producing for Georgia Tech. And, something to note about them, Georgia Tech got 2 quality wins over the SEC in 2014. They defeated Georgia and Mississippi State, 2 very quality wins within the non-conference schedule for them. And Mississippi State was the team they defeated in the bowl game, in the Orange Bowl. Justin Thomas returns at quarterback, and there's 4 offensive line starters that return for this team. What does that mean? Well, obviously it means great protection for the quarterback. He's going to be able to survey the field and get some things done. And Georgia Tech is playing in a conference that is emerging overall, so I think this could be a great year. We might see a top 10 finish, maybe even better, maybe top 5 or 6 finish for Georgia Tech this year. Look for them to be the dark horse coming out of the ACC. Now let's take a look at some bold predictions for the year, and these are just some things that I think could happen this year. I feel pretty strongly about. Wanted to share those with you, so let's take a look at those. I think Georgia Tech's going to win the ACC, folks. I really do. I think the Yellow Jackets are primed and ready, as we stated some of their important facts just a moment ago. Florida State, a little bit, they're in the post Jameis Winston era. They're looking at, getting Everett Golson coming from Notre Dame to be the quarterback now to start for Florida State. Some other positions to fill. Not a definite team like they used to be. A top 1 or 2 contender might fall down a little bit. So this is Georgia Tech's prime opportunity to jump in and take over the reins, and I think they'll have a good chance to do it. So I've got Georgia Tech winning the ACC this year. However, as I said before, the ACC will be the conference left out of the 4-team playoff, so Georgia Tech will not be going to that, in my opinion. Here's a little SEC flavor for you in the next prediction. The Tennessee-Florida rivalry, which has gone on for many, many years, and Florida has actually dominated and won the past 10 games. Tennessee will end that rivalry this year, end the losing streak, that is, with a win in Gainesville. Tennessee will defeat Florida in Florida this year by 14 points or more. That is my bold prediction there. I believe that you put all the factors together, Florida with a brand new coach and a new system. Tennessee brings in a wonderful starting quarterback in Josh Dobbs, 2 very capable running backs, Alvin Kamara and Jalen Hurd. You also have a wealth of wide receivers. I think they're going to miss a receiver or 2 with injuries this year, and they still have a wide range of receivers that can play in this game, up to 4 or 5 receivers they could use in this game. And the exuberant attitude of Butch Jones, the leadership he provides, is going to make a difference. And when you throw in the fact that Florida only has 4 starters coming back on their offensive line, their defense always their strong suit. Their safeties are going to be strong. They're going to be able to go down the field and try to defend the pass. But I think that's where the running game comes in, and I think that's where Josh Dobbs comes in, because if he doesn't have a play to make downfield, Josh Dobbs is going to take off running with the ball, and that's something that I think Florida may have trouble trying to defend. So Tennessee by 14 or more at Florida. Another bold prediction coming up here, and that is the fact that I think 3 SEC coaches will bite the dust this year. Their jobs will be over, and these are not the newest of the flock. I'm looking at Les Miles. I think he's going to take another job. I think the pressure of the SEC West has really eaten away at him slowly, and I think he's ready to just take off and take another job. I think he'll have a job in another conference next year when the 2016 season starts. I also think that Steve Spurrier is looking at trying to get out. I think he's frustrated. Folks, let's be honest. South Carolina has made a wealth of changes, and they've done great things. Steve Spurrier has brought a winning tradition and attitude to this program. They now have swagger. They now have importance. But you're never going to win a national championship at South Carolina. You're never going to quite get that edge in the recruiting and the talent in that area to go all the way to the top. And that's why Steve Spurrier has been limited with 11-win seasons. Many people would kill for an 11-win season, but that's as far as South Carolina's been able to go in the recent past, and I think that's their high point. That's as high as they can go. They faltered last year. The frustration set in. I think Steve Spurrier will retire after this year because there's going to be another subpar season for South Carolina there. And the other coach I think is going to take off is Derek Mason. And I'll just simply put it like this. Derek Mason's in over his head. This gentleman came from Stanford. and had a great situation lined up. Why in the world would you leave a successful Pac-12 program like Stanford to come to the gutter level of the SEC in Vanderbilt? A program that had never seen success in football in its life until James Franklin was here. Now that he's gone, he took the attitude with him, and Vanderbilt is back to being Vandy. I think Derek Mason is in over his head, and I think he'll leave after this year if they don't make him leave. And there's going to be many great contenders, folks, for the Heisman Trophy this year. But I think Ohio State running back Ezekiel Elliott will be the one to win the Heisman. I think Cody Kessler could be a candidate for it, and there'll be others. Nick Chubb is possible. If he has a great year at Georgia, he could certainly be in the mix. And I think you've also got to look at Leonard Fournette at LSU as top contenders. I think the running back class right now is really strong, and they will probably be featured within the Heisman candidate voting when we see that come around at the end of the year. So just some bold predictions there to share with you. And, take those for what you will. Agree, disagree, comment about it. Let me hear what you've got to say in the comment section. Now to my final four. And these are totally my picks, what I think is going to happen. And let me preface my comments by saying that I don't really go with the status quo. I don't really go with everyone else. I try to pick with objectivity and not my heart or not my personal preferences or likes with teams. So be forewarned. Now I can share with you my final four. Okay, at number 4, I think it's going to be UCLA. It's very trendy to pick USC. It's very trendy to pick Oregon. They've been the class acts in the Pac-12 for many years. But let me preface my comments by saying that I think Jim Mora Jr. is one of the best head coaches in the country. Why do I say that? Because Jim Mora, in 3 years at UCLA, has won 29 games. UCLA has had back-to-back 10-win seasons. He has also led this program to a new level of respectability and has brought them into that rivalry again, where the rivalry means something now with USC and UCLA. When Rick Neuheisel was at UCLA, things weren't all that great throughout his tenure there. But Jim Mora Jr. has brought that respectability back. The meaningful nature of that rivalry with the Trojans is really important. And look at it like this. Before Jim Mora was there was 8 years of 9 wins or less for UCLA. So he has proven that he can take them over the top, just that extra step or two up the ladder that proves that they are a contender. And I think this year, with Oregon trying to find a replacement for Mariota and USC a little bit in question at places, not at quarterback, but some other positions, and the fact that UCLA returned 17 starters on both sides of the ball included tells me that UCLA is ready for a prime run. I think the Bruins win the Pac-12 and will be in the Final Four. The Big 12 champion, in my opinion, is going to be TCU. And here's a team, I'm telling you, this team is fierce. TCU has proven their ability. They trounced Ole Miss in the bowl game last year. Wallop Ole Miss to send the message. You leave us out of the 4-team playoff, we're going to show you that you regret that decision. And Gary Patterson's team came out, and they really, really played very, very well. Very nearly mistake-free football. Trouncing Ole Miss, getting a quality win. Now here's the deal. 10 starters back on offense for TCU. And Trevon Boykin, young, flashy, playmaking quarterback that can make things happen with his arm or with his legs. So let's just think about it. TCU looking like they will match every bit of last year's progress and go past that point as well. I think TCU will wind up at number 3 in the playoff as the Big 12 champion. In the Big 10, I know everybody's going to pick Ohio State, and it makes total sense. Ohio State returns a lot of talent. You've got Urban Meyer in charge. I get it. But it's so hard for anybody to repeat as national champions. Alabama knows that. A lot of different teams know that as well. So I'm going to look at a team that has a very experienced quarterback, and they always have a very good defense, and I'm going with Michigan State. I think the Spartans have proven that they've got the consistency, they've got the playmakers to get in there. When you've got a field general as good as Connor Cook, he's going to make some things happen. He's got a good, strong arm. He's very talented. He can move in the pocket if he needs to. He's deceptively fast when he needs to be. And Connor Cook, I think, is going to lead Michigan State to the Final Four, or the 4-team playoff. Number 1, after 2 years of absence, I think the SEC is primed and ready to get back on top of the mountain. They're going to do it through Auburn. I think Auburn is going to be the best team in the country. We've talked about many playmaking quarterbacks, and Auburn has one as well. Jeremy Johnson is one of the best, and he is going to bring a level of poise and calmness and leadership on the field. And Auburn's offense is going to run and click very well. Not to mention their defense. They get Carl Lawson back on defense this year as defensive end after he missed all of last year with an injury. Alex Kozan is going to be back on the offensive line, and that's going to give some good anchor protection there for the quarterback. And when you've got Gus Malzahn, let's just face it, he's a great tactician. He's a great head coach, a great mental marksman. And I think Auburn, when you throw Will Muschamp in there, look, Will Muschamp is just like Lane Kiffin. Brilliant coordinator, not a great head coach. Or maybe it was just the opportunity at Florida. But I think Will Muschamp comes in and turns this Auburn defense into a championship caliber committee, so to speak. And I think Auburn gets it done. I think Auburn defeats TCU in one semifinal. I've got Michigan State over UCLA in the other semifinal. And then in the final matchup for the national championship, I have Auburn defeating Michigan State. So there you have it, folks. Those are the picks, my picks for the Final Four. We threw in some predictions. We had some other picks. And let me just tell you, I'm very interested to see what you folks think. So when you listen, make sure that you put in your comments in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe as you can. And like I said, leave your comments. Be very interested to see what you think. And folks, be ready because episode number 3 coming up next week is going to be an NFL preview. The NFL will get underway about a week after college gets started. We'll take a look at NFL teams, and we'll take a look at season predictions and what's hot and what's not for the NFL season. That'll be coming up next week, so please look forward to that as well. Folks, I'm very glad for you listening. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you at episode 3 and the others down the line. See you next time, folks. Have a good one.